So far, we have covered the multiple choice questions, theoretical questions, calculation questions, questions with graph and figures, and mathematical and statistical questions. In these videos, we're going to discuss about the essay questions. First, what is an essay question? The following are the criteria that should be met for a typical essay question. An essay questions will require the students to compose rather than select their response. And the student's response must consist of more than one sentence. The question should also allow different or original response or unique patterns of response. Lastly, it will require subjective judgment by a competent specialist to judge the accuracy and the quality of the response. If you combine all these criteria together, you will see that an essay questions will require the students to construct essays, compose the response in more than one sentences in their own ways to answer the question. You will expect unique answers from the students, and different students may have different ways of answering the questions in terms of the patterns as well as the sequence the questions is being solved. As for the marking, it will require the judgment by the markers in terms of the accuracy and the qualities of the response. Now, knowing the definitions of the essay, let us look at some example. The example A here is an ineffective essay question. List the 7-step path to making ethical decisions. List them in the correct progressive orders. In fact, this is not an essay question. It seems more like a structured question. Why is it so? First, this question does not require the students to use complete or more than one sentences. Students will get their full marks by simply listing the name and the numbers of each steps. This doesn't meet the criteria as stipulated to have more than one sentences. Also, this question does not allow the original response or response patterns. Since it is asking the students to list up the 7-step path, most likely the relevant informations are coming from the lecture notes or references. If it is so, you will expect all the response will be identical among the students. The students will just have to repeat that 7-step path word by word, and marks shall be awarded. This also doesn't fit the requirements of unique and original response or patterns of response. Third, this kind of questions does not require systematic and complex thinking above the ideas. Asking the students to list up certain informations, it is only C1. It doesn't really need the students to give opinions or to provide any critical inputs towards the problems or the case in the questions. Therefore, this questions is more likely an ineffective essay questions, or it is just a structure question. Now let us look at the second example here, which seems more likely to be an essay question. Explain in what ways a person's failure to apply the step 5 of the 7-step path for making ethical decisions will impact his or her ability to make ethical decisions. Provide an example that illustrates this impact. First, this question is assessing the understanding of the students at 2 levels. The focus is on the step 5 out of that 7-step path. The students will have to first know which is the step 5, and then the students will have to explain how this will affect the ability to make ethical decisions. Now the students will have to demonstrate their understanding about that step 5 of the 7-step path. And then the students are asked to provide an example that illustrates this impact. This example is going to be unique among different students. Now let us analyze these questions based on the definitions of a typical essay question. The questions require the students to compose a response. There is nothing for the student to select. In order to answer this, students will have to compose their own answer. Second, the questions requires the students to give the answers in several sentences. Definitely, based on the question here, one sentence will not be sufficient to answer the entire question. The questions asking the students to explain and to give example. Although if we look from the perspective of the cognitive level, it is only C2 or probably C3. But this can still be an essay question. It doesn't mean that essay questions will always be C4, C5 and C6. Because how do we define the essay are based on the criteria here. And how do we define the cognitive level? It will be based on the thinking order that students need to go through in order to solve the questions. These two are different things. Lastly, the questions allow the students to give different responses and the response patterns. If you look at the question here, you can tell that this question is really testing the comprehensions of the students. A typical notes will just outline the 7-step path of making ethical decision, probably giving some explanations for each steps and why it is important. But the question here is asking about the interpretations of the students over step 5 in terms of the impacts of a person's ability to make ethical decision. You will also see a variety of examples given by the students trying to illustrate their impact. Now, knowing what constitutes an essay question, let us look at the advantages of essay question. And essay questions can be used to assess higher order or critical thinking skills. It is easier to do so when the questions is open-ended in nature, where little guides are being given to the students when answering the questions. You may also use the essay questions to evaluate the students' thinkings and reasoning, as they're going to explain those in their text, how they diagnose the problems in the questions, how they arrange the informations, how they come up with the solutions, what are the justifications, what are their interpretations, how do they foresee the situations, and so on and so forth. And you will know that the thinkings and the reasoning will come from the students individually in unique way, as their solutions will be unique from the other students. Of course, this will be very much dependent on your techniques of setting the essay question. If the essay question is not well designed, you might not be able to achieve the intended purpose. That's why we are here talking about the essay question. Next, the essay question has the advantage to provide authentic experience. There are also limitations for the essay questions. The scope of the assessment will be quite limited. You will have limited samples to be assessed, and you might not be able to cover every little details of that particular course. You can only selectively choose several significant themes or topics within the course to have an in-depth assessment. Another problem with the essay question, it will be the difficulty to grade the papers. You have to read through the student's answer, finding the correct answers, observing the mistakes, and also look into their ways of thinking and reasoning. If it makes sense, is it logical, is it justified, before you can decide. As far as the marking scheme is concerned, there may not be a standard answer. Any logical answers will do. As a result, the marking will be more subjective as compared to the MCQ. There will be a lot of decisions made whether marks is going to be awarded to the students based on the answers given by the students. In order to determine the marks to be awarded, the thinkings and the reasoning must be justified and logical. And this makes the grading of the students' answer time consuming. Another problem with essay question is that the accuracy of assessment of the levels of understanding as well as the ability of students solving the problem may be affected due to poor writings of the students. If the students have difficulty in English, let's say now the essay is conducted in English, students might have difficulty to effectively deliver the message or to make the information systematically organized and explained to the markers. Then this might affect their results. Or students might have difficulty of using the accurate terminologies, which unintentionally alters the meanings of their message and eventually leads to the confusions or ambiguity to the markers. All these factors can affect the accuracy of the assessment.